Good afternoon, I'm Mamta Bhardwaj, and welcome to another edition of Jigyasa. We'll just give it a few more moments as we have people joining us, so just sit tight, and we'll start the session in about a minute. Great. So we have enough people joining us. We'll begin. Like I said, once again, I'm Mamta Bhardwaj, and I head employer branding at the Nudge Institute. And welcome to another edition of Jigyasa with the ecosystem. Jigyasa itself is a platform for you to hear from social sector professionals about their experiences, solving some of the hardest problems from within the sector. Jigyasa as an initiative seeks to help you unpack the work and life of an individual in the sector and give you the tools to access the sector as a part of your own professional journey. And we hope to do that through conversations with people who have embarked on this journey themselves. Before that, a little bit about the Nudge Institute. Over 9 years ago, we started with the belief that every human being deserves a dignified life out of poverty. Nudge works on ground through its livelihood programs and with multiple stakeholders across the livelihoods ecosystem. This edition of Jigyasa with the ecosystem, we have SauraMandala from our ecosystem joining us. Karthik, the founder of SauraMandala, is in conversation with Sreya Mozumdar from the National Partnerships team at the Nudge. SauraMandala was a part of the Nudge's accelerator cohorts 5 and 6. The organization works towards accelerating social and economic change in remote and inaccessible communities through collaborative action. Now, before I invite our speakers to share their thoughts and insights, a little about the topic on hand. While the government and social sector organizations have often encountered one another in the pursuit of the greater good, it is partnerships that have been critical to achieving impact at scale. They act as vehicles to unlock capital, talent, technology, and policy for creating impact at scale. Collaborations with the government has given social sector organizations access to infrastructure as well as networks to deliver programmatic solutions in geographies that were previously impenetrable. It has also helped create inroads for the sector to play an active role at a policy level, all while navigating the complexities of government bodies and functions. In this edition of Jigyasa, we will explore the roles and opportunities in working at these intersections, and within this, how one can plan to navigate their own career trajectories. So, diving right into it, I would like to invite our speakers to introduce themselves and speak a little to how they found themselves drawn to the social impact space to begin with. Shreya, if we may begin with you.
Thanks, Mamta, for setting up the context so well. It's been almost an 18-year-old journey for me in the social sector. So I have navigated roles across different kinds of civil society organizations. And my journey finally led me to Nudge 3 years ago, where I was offered this role of working in a government-facing program management unit. Those who are familiar with the landscape would know these as PMUs. And it's been quite a whirlwind ride since. Happy to be sharing experiences on Jigyasa.
And Karthik, can we hear from you?
Hi, thanks Mamta for that introduction, and also Nudge for having us here today. So I think I've been in the social space for about 6.5 years now. I got into it primarily to do what I thought I liked doing, but then I think once you get into it, you realize how big a lot of these problems are, and that's how the organization's grown, and we've sort of picked the Northeast as the region that we want to work in. So that's how I got into the space.
Great, thanks, Shreya and Karthik. While we move on into the conversation, I'd also like to let our audience know that you could share your comments and questions with us in the comment section, and we'll try and take as many questions as possible towards the end of the session, and we have enough time allocated for that. So please feel free to engage and share your thoughts with us as well as your questions for our speakers. So as we dive into this conversation, before we get into individual professional journeys and the scope for that, Shreya and Karthik, can we begin with your thoughts on some of the most successful and high impact government social sector collaborations that we are witnessing today? Karthik, can we begin with you?
Yeah, I think if you look at a lot of the programs that have come out in the digital public goods space, right? So the way that the government has been able to also, I think, engage different players either in civil society or in the private space to actually enable governance. I think to me that's one of the biggest and most successful partnerships that at least in the near future, and it's been the most impactful as well. And I think a lot of things to take away from that in terms of how the government can work with the social sector and other ecosystem partners in general.
Right. Shreya, if I could bring the same question to you.
It's interesting if you travel back and you look at the origins of certain social movements that have shaped some of the key policy initiatives that we see so prominently in the government space right now. We had the um, RTI Information Act that sprung from the Right to Information movement, which was steered by civil societies, born out of movements in Rajasthan. Um, and I think ever since then, there has been an increased understanding that grassroots organizations with a close ear to the ground, civil society organizations that have managed to reach where government may not have reached to, offer a perspective on both um, who to reach and how to reach them. And more recently, we've seen, apart from the examples that Karthik cited in the digital public space, we've seen a lot of these national level, regional level CSOs like Pradhan, Pratham, um, Bal Raksha Bharat, who worked across different thematic areas of education, of um, child rights, of health, very, very closely with the government to scale their flagship programs through institutional partnerships, Mamta. So this,
Yeah,
as a landscape, I think this is emerging as a very, very promising sector for young professionals as well.
Yeah, I think even if you look at what we have, I think, as the largest ecosystem of Anganwadis and the roles that ANMs play in the public health space, a lot of these have been piloted, iterated, and built in the social sector at the grassroots at various levels. And I think these have then gone on to show a lot of evidence and then eventual government adoption. So a lot of our social institutions as well that we have as part of policy today, probably a good bunch of them started in the social space and then had their journey of adoption over the last couple of decades.
Right. Thanks, Karthik. What I want to move on to now is when we think of these collaborations and working with the government, the first thing that comes to mind is scale and the ability to scale a project or reach a larger audience. So, in a way, when you're working with the government, how does the social sector, in the initial stages itself, how is it able to redesign or design programs and reimagine outcomes with government as one of the players involved?
I think that's a great question, Mamta. If you take our case in point at the Nudge Institute, when we started working with the Ministry of Rural Development about 3-4 years ago, there was no defined blueprint on how we will look at designing, developing the strategy of economic inclusion at scale. But there was definite intent on the part of both Nudge as an organization to offer solutions, to offer um, uh, work that could be scaled sustainably within the government architecture, and also from the government who were interested in making increased outlays and investments on this problem. So, yes, there was a marriage of intent, and it's very interesting to see how this blueprint for scale gradually developed. We did have a program design model that had been globally tested for efficacy that was piloted by the Ministry of Rural Development. And these pilots are still ongoing across multiple states as of now. Learnings from this pilot are being iteratively represented, fed, and informed into program design, policy iterations on economic inclusion at the ministry. And we are now at a point where there's sufficient proof of concept through these pilots. There's sufficient confidence that A, this program design works. It works across the diverse contexts of marginality that we see in India. It works well when integrated into government architecture at the state and national level. And now there is a clear intent that we see even from the government to propagate this at a much wider level. And the pathway to scale for us has become much, much clearer. And we've moved from, in a sense, lending direction to program and pilot interventions to now informing and supporting the ministry on policy interventions for scale.
I think,
Karthik,
yeah, building on what Shreya was saying, and I think the most common example I use, because we get this question a lot when we work, when people want to understand our work, is that I think governments are like extremely large and complex organizations, right? So the most common example I like to give people is like the government is like Google, and they are very good at doing a couple of things well. And they do that extremely well. And a couple of those things is to scale, to sort of build ecosystems at a very large scale. But what they find it hard to do is to dynamically sort of try and find new ideas as things change on the ground, try and come up with new ideas, new pilots. And I think that's where they struggle. And if you look at how the likes of the Google solve this, they actually allow the younger, smaller folks to actually do the iteration, and they largely acquire startups or ideas, and eventually startups find that way to scale through something like a Google. And I think that's a good way of us of to look at what is the role does civil society play here, because within civil society or even the social enterprise private sector, I think you have that liberty to be agile, to iterate. You get to decide the size of your operations in the start and generate a lot of this evidence, which the government could actually then go on to acquire. And I think governments are actually very, very good at scaling things, whether it's a good or the bad. They're extremely good at scaling things. So I think that's how we've looked at the role that we play, and which has also helped a lot actually in our government partnerships and conversations.
Yeah, I think I'll just build from there to also say that the way that we are also building our teams at the ministry, central ministry and state government levels, we've seen that there is a gradual expansion of our roles and our mandate. That with increased experience, with the building of relationships and confidence on both sides, we are gradually entrusted with more and more roles that relate to strategic thinking, program design, policy inputs. We've been called upon to provide support in building technology infrastructure for the government. We've been called upon to bring about a certain sharpness in the way that the government does research and policy itself. The building of evidential advocacy, and also more recently, also as a ecosystem convener, where we also have enough feet on the ground to leverage social capital within the sector and bring on board like-minded civil society organizations and practitioners who help this scaling within the government overall.
Great. Thank you for sharing these aspects, Shreya, because a lot of our viewers are definitely people who are considering opportunities or are just navigating and exploring the scope for engaging with these spaces. And, these sort of insights will help them reimagine or, find themselves in this space. And I also like to call out to our audience saying you could share your questions for our speakers in the comment section. You could share your comments with us and we'll try and take them live. With that quick reminder, moving on to the next part of what we have planned in the conversation, which is drawing attention to the opportunities for engagement with the government and the social sector in that sort of intersectional space. And Shreya and Karthik, I'd like to invite both of you to speak from your own experience and also from the people that you work with, to say what kind of educational backgrounds you come from, what professional backgrounds you come from, and how you found application for that in the sector and how you were able to build on it. And Karthik, if we could start with you. Yes.
Yeah, I think in my case, my educational background might not be fully related to what I'm doing now because I'm an engineer by education. But I think when we sort of got into the social space and started to look at the role that we'd like to play with government, so we were also, I think, initially of the opinion, because we had never done this before, we were a little unsure as to how would we, get a foot in the door. How would an organization like ours, which is largely a non-profit trying to solve something in entrepreneurship or in education, find an entry into this ecosystem? But I think to our surprise, what we found was that within the government system, because the problems are so large, there is opportunity pretty much at every level. There is, of course, opportunity, I think, as an organization to start conversations with governments at multiple levels, where we're able to take maybe ideas of things that have worked either on the ground where we are working or from somewhere else. And as long as we're able to package it in a way that is able to solve the government's problem, I think it opens up a lot of avenues, and which includes opportunities for organizations and individuals to work. But I think also across, I think, specific aspects like I can definitely say if there is expertise in things like agroforestry or water management. These are things where the government are also looking for expertise, and at any point where the government is looking for expertise is a good place for somebody to be able to find an opportunity, and this could happen either as an individual or even as an organization.
Right. Just quickly before we move on to Shreya, Karthik, I'd also like to bring to you, as the founder of the organization, you're also sort of building your team and you're hiring. And in that, what are the kind of backgrounds that you look for when you're building your team across departments and across functions? What is the sort of thought process that goes into, getting people interested in these roles and doing well in these roles?
So I think obviously some of the aspects are definitely the team verticals, and I think aspects like data and knowledge, and things like monitoring and evaluation, at least at an organization level. But one of the things that we always ask, for when we're hiring people is because a lot of our interface is with working with people in the system, is if they're up for tasks that would come at a very ad hoc level. Because I think the way it works is because the supply and demand is so sort of skewed in one sense, that once you sort of interface with the government and they know that there is a certain capability that is there, there will always be, I think, opportunities that will come up. So we definitely, I think, ask for that. Plus, I think also more on the softer skill side, I think a lot of patience, perseverance, because it requires that kind of patience to be able to work with such a very complex system.
Right. Thanks, Karthik. So, Shreya, if I could bring that question to you and what you've experienced in your journey so far.
I'd actually like to begin from where Karthik left off. It's a subject close to my heart because we are always at the nudge, given how our work has increased exponentially with central ministries and state governments. We're always looking at attracting the right kind of person for these government facing roles. I think apart from the sectoral and thematic expertise that we look for, aligned with the ministry mandate against which we are working, I cannot emphasize the temperamental attributes that a person working with the government needs to bring to the role. It's a fairly complex environment. And I say this because the goalposts are constantly shifting, the priorities are constantly being reorganized, leadership keeps changing, relationships need to be built overnight and anew. And there needs to be a certain agility and a resilience innately in a person who can respond to the constant kind of flux, yet keep his or her equanimity, keep his or her eye on the North Star, uh, continue to make the organizational presence felt and relevant through all of these changes. So, yes, I mean, technical skills, yes, and I think Karthik has spoken adequately about that. But I think these functional skills are what make you survive and thrive in the government.
Great. All right. Thank you, Shreya, for sharing your thoughts on that. Just moving on to once one finds an opportunity in the sector and finds their sort of space to fulfill their purpose in that sense. What are the unique challenges and opportunities that can help them shape their careers in the long run? Because many a time people who join the sector and who look to work with the government through the social sector are doing it for the first time, having worked in the private sector before, having worked with startups or corporate sectors before this, where the ways of functioning are very different. So if considering that the social sector is sort of like an intent first space, and they do enter the space with a lot of intent, what are the opportunities they have to individually build and sustain that intent and interest in their careers in the long run? Karthik, if I can bring this to you.
So I think you mentioned intent and purpose while you were sort of framing your question, and I think those two coupled with I think the passion and really wanting to do this is what you need at the core of it, and added to it I think a lot of the technical capabilities or expertise that you have. If one is able to sort of try and understand in terms of what are the gaps that the government has, and then have that. I definitely think you need something way more than say job alignment or thematic expertise and so on, because it's going to take so much more out of you just because of I think a lot of things that Shreya mentioned, right? The shifting goalposts. I don't think goalposts are ever at the same point. Even while having a conversation, by the end of the conversation, sometimes it might have changed. So I think it's largely that if you're able to bring that alignment or that intersection of what you really want to do, what you're passionate about, and maybe some associated expertise that you have. Because I've also seen a lot of people who've offered their time to the government post retirement, and but just because they are so passionate about what they want to do, they've actually been able to get into the system, build like a good place for themselves, either as an advisor or no, or as somebody who plays a very integral role in that system, and actually create a lot of impact.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the landscape that currently this space offers, Mamta. Apart from the civil society organizations who work with the government through financial, non-financial partnerships, technical and otherwise, there are also a large gamut of roles that are available for work in the ministry. Young professionals, independent consultants, sector domain experts on part-time, short-term basis, retired government officers, different kinds of staff that are hired either directly or outsourced from the government. It's a very very large space. But I think the point that you made about intent really comes into play, because yes, there are opportunities, and there are opportunities that can be capitalized on as well, but you need to have the right set of softer skills to really survive and do well in the government. I've seen many technical consultants who've just not been able to get their um, cases considered or perspectives heard, because they don't have an understanding of how decision making flows in the government, because they don't have an understanding of the importance of building relationships at different levels, because they don't have an understanding of how you really need to understand what already exists in the system without trying to change it completely when you come in. So yes, I think a lot of intent, but again, a determination to be in it for the longer game. Really understand mm, architecture and the government that you're working with, the architecture that you're working with, and I think there's a lot to do, and opportunities are presenting themselves every day.
That's great. That's actually wonderful to hear. And we have some audience questions flowing in as well. So, in the interest of time, I'd also like to bring in a few questions that we had come in earlier through our forms. And then we'll move on to some live audience questions. And thank you to all the audience folks who are sharing it there. Please continue to do so. We'll take it in just a minute after these questions. Just to begin with, what does the day-to-day of working with the ministry look like? And Shreya, if I can bring this to you.
Wow, that's a good one, and I wish that I could say that every day has a set routine, but you really have to be very agile, walking into the ministry every day. You might have your own set of goals and your own set of priorities that you're working on that have been agreed within the ministry, but you could be called upon to provide support to any aligned thematic within the ministry if there is an urgency. And I believe that's the beauty of the work within the government as well. We've learned so much as a team, both at Rural Development Ministry and at the Social Justice Ministry, from interacting with other domains, from sitting in their meetings, from brainstorming with them on potential intersectionalities. So I think it's not a straight-jacketed role. So it's somebody who is willing to and has the energy and the agility to mix it up. But of course, at the end of the day, also have that consistency and that razor sharp focus on his or her North Star. Even as we were pulled into multiple things at the ministry, both at RD and at Social Justice Empowerment, I think our team have always managed to prioritize, place, represent the work on economic inclusion at every given opportunity. And I think, a day-to-day would involve a fair bit of balancing of both interests.
And Karthik, what are your thoughts on this?
I think my experience has been the exact same. Very, I think, dynamic and demanding in that sense, and it's how the system is, right? There's so much to do. It is there are so many things happening at the same time, and they're all interconnected to each other. So you could start your day with having like a very solid plan for it, and 2 hours into the day, it's all completely changed. But I think one thing that Shreya mentioned also is that, which was I think is very important, is because you will get pulled in so many directions, you also need to, I think, have the skill of balancing. I think maybe sort of balancing the main thing, like she said, the North Star of what you want to do, but then also maintain and build these other relationships and rapport in the system by finding either ways to help them out, or giving some time to brainstorm on things. Because how it usually works is the next direction that you would want to go to, these relationships are then actually what becomes very important.
Right. Thanks. Just one more question before we move on to the live audience questions. For someone who works or is situated outside of this intersectional space or has very little access to this space, it can be a little confusing or daunting to find the right opportunity for them to sort of make those inroads. So how would you recommend that somebody who is new but with a lot of interest navigate this space and find an opportunity to sort of begin their work in this social sector and government intersection space?
I think if somebody is new in the sense that they're also maybe not experienced and they're looking to start their journey in a sense, there are many opportunities, I think, to latch on to work that is already happening. I know of some established programs that allow you to intern with people working inside of the system. The organizations, the PMUs, many of them who are there also constantly have smaller roles or entry level roles where either one can reach out or they constantly have opportunities available. So I think if somebody is looking to learn and just get started, maybe some of these are some of the things I can think of.
Right. Shreya, would you like to
Yeah,
chip
I
in?
think there are lots of ministries and state governments that advertise for young professionals to join their workspace, and that's actually a brilliant space for learning how the government ecosystem works. So many of our own state teams across the country now are benefiting from this young professional experience that we've been lucky enough to attract really a working understanding of the brass tacks of how district block community level work is carried out within the government architecture. That is very helpful if you want to gain entry into these kind of government roles. I think, as Karthik said, there are a lot of organizations now who are partnering with the government at scale, and I think in many of the major central ministries like um, rural development, agriculture, farmers welfare, health, Niti Aayog, lot of exciting partnerships that they are inviting with technical support organizations. So that could be another kind of a launching pad for interested people to apply to. And of course, organizations like us will take that opportunity. We're always on the lookout for young people who are able to handle complexity, are looking at the challenge of working at scale to solve wicked problems, and we'd be happy to offer that space to the right kind of person.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially if folks want to move to the Northeast and work with governments there, or folks from the Northeast want to move back and work with governments, I think we'll also take this space to put like a small pitch out there.
Great. Great. Thanks for that very nice plug-in, guys. And we'll move on to some live audience questions now. We have a question from Mohit who says government partnerships always come with some riders which aren't usually aligned with the organization's vision. So in that case, what should be done?
So I think this is always going to be the case, right? So when an organization sort of goes with certain priorities, and those are never going to match the government's as is in the first go. I think it's always going to be a conversation about little bit of negotiation to find what that middle ground is. Uh, and I think it's also important to have that rapport in a sense that if this is too much of non-alignment, the organizations should be able to actually politely say no or walk away from that um, conversation at times because if you really want this to work and then a good partnership to come out, it requires a lot of speaking to maybe multiple different people within that department or multiple departments in a state to actually find that alignment, and which is probably important. So in a lot of cases, I think what happens is and this is what we also used to do in the start, we would go and pitch something to the government and expect them to sort of adopt it right away. And it took us quite a bit of time to realize that this sales pitch sort of an approach is really not going to work. It's really about, I think, spending time to understand where that alignment is. And because even if it's a percentage of your program or something that you have, just because there is scale on the other hand, it still becomes something impactful and good to work with.
Right.
I cannot agree more. I think there have been many, many instances over the past couple of years as we have increased our work and engagement with the government, where we've walked in with a very, very, in our mind, a very solid, well articulated, well reasoned, relevant pitch. And we've had curveballs thrown at us in terms of the existing priorities, repurposing what we bring to the table for greater alignment. And it is never one conversation, it is never one pitch at the table. Um, continued conversations, seeing how much can be negotiated on, being very, very clear at the same time on what your non-negotiables are. I'll give a simple example to qualify this. When we started our work with the most excluded rural communities, this was not a target group that many were focusing on. We've been used to NGOs and CSOs working with the government on poverty alleviation programs with rural poor. But what is this strange phenomenon called ultra poverty? How do you define it? How do you enumerate it? How do you contextualize it for different states across the country? And in these conversations with different stakeholders, where these questions were subsequently thrown at us, we arrived at our own understanding at how much we could ourselves realign, repurpose our understanding of fundamental principles of economic exclusion, and what we could actually put on the table that could see the light of day. The other thing that I also want to kind of bring up is that there are two aspects to the furthering of these conversations also. One is the individual relationship, the confidence that you bring to the table as a negotiator, as somebody who's presenting the case, and how you continue to show up every day with quality, with data, with research and insights to back your case. But the other thing is that a lot of this individual relationship building needs to be backed up by institutional relationship building as well. What does the larger institution really stand for? What are some of its core fundamental principle ideologies that sit well within ministry mandates? Who in the organization is continually communicating the need for continued investment, prioritization to the government? So it's a lot of little things. It's a long game.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing those really powerful insights in a very threadbare manner. Sort of really helps understand the space better in all its elements. We'll take the next question from Surbhi Yadav, who asks, what are some capacities young nonprofits should build to try to materialize their first government partnership at district level?
So I think one of the things that I always tell organizations that ask us this is um, one of the things that as nonprofits do, because we're usually, to start with in a government partnership, we are not funded by the government. We usually have some sort of philanthropy or CSR backing us, and we sort of tend to use that as a way in to say that, hey, we already have this amount of money and we want to do this project and this will solve your problems. And our massive learning with this has been that this actually sort of does not really help always with partnership building, because then somebody on the other side starts to see you as somebody with, okay, these people have something to do, they already have raised the money, they need my permission to sort of execute this particular project in my district or in my state. So and that usually sort of changes the whole equation. So in order to build partnerships, I think what's required is to actually genuinely put that effort in the start to show up and say, let's say if this is happening at a district level, to try and show up and really build on what are the priorities of this person or this officer at a district level. If you have insights from that district itself, to try and get their inputs on it, and then build on that before it sort of moves to solutions, because otherwise they just, the way it's perceived is completely different, and that does not help to move towards partnership. So I think that's been a very important learning for us. We've completely changed how we approach governments at a state or a district level, even if we have the funds for it, and we've seen it work for us.
Great. Thank you, Karthik, for that. Simply in the interest of time, I'll also move on to the next question. And we have time for another 3 questions, I think, but do continue to share them with us. We'll try and respond to as many as possible. If not through the live session, then eventually through our mails or something. So the next question from Vidhi is, how do you identify the right people at the government level for any project? Can you share examples? And Sreya, if I can bring this to you.
identifying right stakeholders is not something that you really have any control over. I would want to preface my comments to this question with this. But also, I think to be able to develop the skill to work across the spectrum. When we first started our work in the ministries, we were very fortunate to have really brilliant bureaucrats who really were intent aligned, wanted to focus on efforts towards the most excluded. And that really helped in opening doors for us and got us a long way. But we've also had experiences where the very concept of people having been communities being left behind in the current rural context have been contested from the word go by stakeholders in the government. But we've had to persist. We've had to persist in placing the right kind of data sensitively in front of them. We've had to take the concerned stakeholders and officials to immersive field visits to show them models that are working with the target groups in questions. We've had to organize ecosystem convenings where other civil society organizations who had a rich legacy of grassroots work also come and advocate for the same kind of issues. So it's not really a one size fits all cookie cutter approach. And you will find both ends of the spectrum in on the opposite side of the table, but you have to be flexible, agile, and responsive enough to keep your agenda active and well represented, irrespective.
Great. Thanks, Sreya. We'll take one more question from Venkat. How can a tech for profit social startup in India partner with the government for SDG related initiatives in a way that benefits both parties?
I think if anyone is able to sort of spend time to understand what are the gaps and how one solution is able to address it, if not, and I don't think the expectation is also that the gaps are solved. I think if the government gets a sense that this is a partner that they can work with, the solution that they have will help them address this challenge and move further along the path. I think that's when it moves towards more of a fruitful partnership. And I'd go back to what I mentioned a little before. So if this becomes about taking a solution and trying to tell the government that it will solve everything, it usually doesn't land well, because at every stage, probably somebody sitting inside the government has seen this problem from a much larger and a much wider perspective. And I think, yeah, so I think if one is able to really focus on what the crux of that gap or that problem is, then I think those partnerships should be doable.
Great. Sure, Shreya.
Okay.
You had...
Go ahead, Mamta.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to just kind of clarify whether Venkat's question was also speaking to an increased role of tech first profits in their engagement with government, whether we see that as an increasing trend or not, and definitely so. I think just to kind of put it out there, that there is a lot of work that is currently happening in central ministries on using technology for decision support systems for information and analysis. And I think these kind of partnerships at an institutional level, at project levels, have really, really, accelerated over the last few years.
Great. Thanks, Shreya. Thanks for bringing that aspect in. Another question from Surbhi, which we would like to take in, is what does the government expect from PMUs from CSOs, and what reporting expectations the CSO has from their PMUs sitting in the ministry or administrative offices?
Again, I mean, this is not a one-size-fits-all approach, but I can speak to our experience of navigating this in central ministries, where initially there was a pretty broad blueprint that we based our scope of work out of, and we used subsequent interactions with senior stakeholders in the government, with program division officials, with other thematic resources in the ministry to arrive at more sharpened kind of objectives and a narrower scope of work. In terms of reporting, etc., I think that these are a few of the small things that really help in making a difference in how you're located in the ministry. Maintaining of key small hygiene practices like being on time with your meeting minutes, being very, very particular about submitting field reports on time, adhering to government formats for reporting at decided periodicities, pitching in when there is a need for extra additional hands in terms of documentation, etc. All of these things and particular focus towards maintaining quality and timeliness in all of these things, I think goes a long way.
Nice. Thank you, Shreya. If I can also, like I said, in the interest of time, try and take another question. And how much, we have a question from Amit, who asks, how much of an involvement are governments at a local urban level looking at with professionals who have exposure to the private sector? And they have private sector experience. It could be across a variety of areas such as urban transport, urban poverty alleviation, climate change, etc. So if I could open that question to you, Karthik.
So we ourselves directly haven't worked too much in the urban space, but I think from what I've seen, at least in Bangalore, there is a fair sense of conversation that happens with private sector professionals and organizations, and I think at various levels in the government. It might definitely be it might be different for other cities, but I think at least over here, the level of accessibility I would actually say is pretty high. And there is also an openness to the fact that there could be somebody out there with the right kind of skills or the ideas or something that they've tried and tested that could actually be useful to the government. And I've seen multiple examples of it which have found their way into I think urban design in terms of say policies and so on.
Yeah, I think I would echo this for Delhi as well, in the sense that I think that that there is a lot of conversation around issues of urban poverty alleviation, informal sector work in urban areas, the issues of homelessness, occupational vulnerability in that we see in unorganized sector work in urban areas, and there's been a pretty dynamic interface between government and different kinds of private sector people on the same. So there's been an openness here that I see as well.
Yeah, I think it's been pretty high for Delhi as well. I think a lot of the work that happened in education also with the Delhi government had a
Education,
lot of,
health, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
had a very active role that people in either the private or the civil society space played in I think bringing a lot of those policies into the Delhi government's work. So for sure.
There's a lot of policy work around provision of shelter for homelessness, for homeless people in urban areas, also emanated from a lot of activism and deliberation between the government and CSOs and private sector people in Delhi.
And I think also a lot of convening power that the private sector has to actually get various different people from either the government or from various other sectors, and that's also been and I think that happens a lot more in the cities and in the urban space for sure.
Great. Thank you, Karthik, and thank you, Shreya. We'll take one more question before I open it up for your final comments before we conclude the session. The final question we're taking is from Madhav, who says, what has been your experience or challenges in institutionalizing a program or product with the government? In particular, having the government resource the program for the long term from their budget?
Okay. No, I think institutionalization is like a big and complex word, and the process of it is even more complex than that. So, but our experience of working with the government of Meghalaya is actually so far is been pretty good. What we have found is that if there was evidence that you can take to the government in a way that they can understand, in a way that it helps them make decisions at a policy level or at a allocation of public money level, there is a lot of openness to actually for them to either allocate or in some cases provide the budgets needed to build upon that idea and take it to scale. Though I think one major learning has been that inherently the programs that are designed within civil society organizations are designed to be programs. And when the design happens within the government space, it is far more complex than that. And organization has to usually remove a lot of the like strip down the project or the program to a level that can be scaled with the government, and then I think the institutionalization is something that will happen. And also, I think the sheer scale at which the government works, as long as there is rapport and relationship, and if they're convinced of this idea, if you're able to help them build ownership of the idea, then it might take time and might take a lot of time, but definitely the government will bank on ideas that have the evidence. And yeah, and it could happen either through direct allocation or maybe through direct funding to try and see this at a larger scale for them to be more convinced.
Right. Shreya, if you could take this as well and also share your concluding remarks with us in opportunities in this space for aspiring professionals, could be, early stage, mid stage, experienced professionals, and cover it for us.
Yeah, so institutionalization again, very much a long-term game, but it begins with basically being able to articulate a reasoned approach that the government can find the resources to back. And I'm saying this on the back of our own experiences at the Rural Development Ministry, where we were proposing a program model which had as a financing instrument a grant component, which was not part of the overall fabric of the central ministry architecture. But with reasoned persuasion, with evidence, with proof of concept pilots, we've been gradually able to introduce that as a non-negotiable aspect of outlays moving ahead. It's a big win for us, but it didn't happen overnight, right? The other piece about institutionalization is also keeping things simple and aiming at operational excellence, because what will work for a small program in one block, in one district, in one state may not work when it needs to be scaled across community institutions, across government infrastructure across the country, right? So how do you keep breaking down programs into as simple operational modules as you can without compromising on quality? And how do you keep continuously focusing on operational excellence as a way to scale through the various layers? I think these have been two takeaways for us. Concluding comments, nothing really much to add apart from what has already been said, except that this is shaping up to be a very, very dynamic and exciting space. 3 years ago, when I entered this space, I didn't know whether I had the skills or the stomach for it. Better part of my social sector journey has been on the other side, working with nonprofits and civil society organizations. But I think it takes a special kind of skill set and an understanding to navigate work within the government, one that I have come to appreciate over the last 3 years. I think this is a very, very exciting space for young people who are looking at tackling challenges at scale, who have the agility and the sharpness to kind of navigate through various intersections at a given point in time, And also the trade-off being that you get to see impact on a scale that is just simply not possible elsewhere. So I can't think of a better incentive than that for people who want to work in this space, Mamta.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you for that encouraging note. And Karthik, if I could open this for your final comments.
Yeah, I think completely agree with everything Shreya said. I think the first thing that will happen when you start to work with the government is all your previous thoughts and anything that you had thought of how efficient or inefficient the government system was, you'll all of that will break, and there'll be a sense of appreciation, I think, for the amount of work that actually goes on to keep this larger system running. And I think this happens at all levels. A lot of it happens behind the scenes. A lot of it is a lot of hard work, and it's very complex problems to solve. So I think so that definitely does happen, but it's what you also realize is that this is the largest lever of change that is there, and depending on whether your work is applicable at a panchayat level or a block or a district or a state or even at the national level, I think at each level an organization or a person can really carve out that place for themselves, and in a way integrate and leverage this complexity and the reach that the government ecosystem has, and turn that into real impact. And it's, I mean, at least for us, I think it's almost addictive in a sense that once you start working with the government, the problems are so challenging and big and exciting to solve, and that's actually what keeps the organization and the people going. Saying that okay, here's something to look forward to. This is something that we'd like to solve at scale, and yeah, like Shreya said, the kind of impact, the scale at which the impact can happen is not available anywhere else.
Great. Thank you, Shreya. Thank you, Karthik, for sharing your rich insights with us and from your lived experiences. I think what is very interesting is that you were able to break it down bit by bit for us to be able to understand very complex nuances of working with the government. And also a big shout out to our audience for sharing these wonderful questions with us. And I hope that we were able to cover as many as possible and give you the kind of relevant responses that you were looking for. And before we close the session out, I'd like to call out that the Nudge is, of course, always hiring for a range of roles across functions. So the link is in the comments, and you can always visit our website to check out the roles that we're hiring for currently. And once again, thank you for attending, both to our audience and our speakers. We'll see you at the next edition of Jigyasa.
Thank you so much for having us.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Thanks.